We're pleased to welcome Dr. Lesley Istead. She's an assistant professor at Carleton University School of Information Technology. Her research interests include computer graphics, stereoscopic 3D, film production pipelines, visual effects, human-computer interaction, and applications of machine learning. And today she'll be talking on is AI killing film production. So please, Dr. Istead, take it away.
All right. Hi, everyone. So today I want to talk to you about a topic that I'm sure if you have been around any web forums, Reddit, or anything, there's this big burning question, is AI killing? And then a field. So today I want to focus on film production, and we're going to look at how AI is actually being used in film production and visual effects, and where the challenges are that we still need to solve. So the big question is, can't we just open up something like Runway ML or Stable Diffusion or Dolly and just say, okay, I'm going to type in some text and you generate the movie for me. Can't we just do text to video? Works great, doesn't it? Well, let's see. So a few days ago, I tried to produce a short film with just a few shots about a grad student working in a dark and dreary office without any windows at their computer. And let's see what we managed to get out of that. So what you can see there is, yeah, we got some shots. They're kind of interesting, and they roughly looked realistic. That code was some kind of mystery. But surely we can do better than that. So I have here Runway ML, which is actually partnered up with Lionsgate Films to do various AI-related tasks related to film production. So does anyone have a prompt they'd like to try to turn into a short film real quick? Anyone have something they'd like to shout out?
Yeah, suggestions from the audience. Who wants to? Got something expensive.
Movie. Let's see. Spies jumping from rooftop to rooftop.
All right.
Stuff.
Okay. And would you like a close-up shot, a wide-angle shot, a cowboy shot?
Are we allowed variety?
You got to choose just one.
Okay. Wide angle.
Okay. So let's do a wide-angle shot of spies jumping between rooftops, 007 style. All right.
Okay.
So this is a fairly straightforward prompt. We've indicated what kind of shot we want to have. We've indicated what we want in the shot, and we've given it a bit of a style. So we'll hit generate. And yeah, it does take a few minutes. We'll see what happens. Unfortunately, these things are not instantaneous, but something as simple as this, we are expecting in our mind that we should get something fairly straightforward in return to us. Now, I've only asked it to generate a 5-second shot here, because obviously generating a longer one would take a lot longer. But I will comment that most of these text-to-video generator tools, they can't generate more than 5 or 10 seconds of video at a time. So if you're thinking that you can just go in and here's a script, generate the whole movie, not quite. But let's just try an individual shot. We're almost there. All right, let's make this full screen and we'll hit play. Well, it's something.
It jumped off the roof.
They have jumped off a roof. It is definitely a wide angle shot, though it is panning around, which is not really what we asked for. There are definitely rooftops in there, and I'm not sure, is that people or it's kind of Matrix-like.
That's almost like the Matrix one.
Yeah.
All right. So that's what happens if you open up one of these wonderful text to video generator tools. And again, this one is one that is sponsored by Lionsgate Film. And you just start typing in a prompt what you can anticipate getting out of it. I actually tried another one this morning with my kids. It was a fun one where we wanted to have a wide angle shot of a snowman running away from a fire-breathing dragon at the golden hour. And just to give you a better sense of what you can expect, well, there's something that might resemble a dragon. I'm not sure where the snowman is.
Wow, we just changed it last second.
So that's what we're getting out of these kinds of tools, unfortunately. So this idea that you can just give one of these tools some description and say, okay, go make me a movie, or even make me a scene, or make me a shot, it's not happening. We are way, way, way far off the mark. And even when I tried to make a sequence of shots with the grad student working in the dreary office, there are a lot of fundamental problems that we have making this AI generated content. One of the most important things in a film is this concept of continuity. If I have two characters sitting down at a table having a conversation, I'm going to have a shot that shows the two characters sitting at the table to let the audience know there are two people. They might be talking to each other. And then I'm going to alternate shots between the first and second character as each of them takes their turn speaking. And one of the problems that we have with film is that if the appearance of the characters changes during this sequence of short shots in their conversation, we will have broken continuity. So if the color of their shirt changed, or the position that they were sitting changed, or their physical appearance changed, the audience would suddenly become very confused because they would be like, when did this character suddenly change their shirt in the conversation? Why did they suddenly go from having purple hair to blue hair in the conversation? So continuity is absolutely critical when we're making a film. And one of the problems we have with this AI generated content, even when we're generating the shots piece by piece, is there is a serious lack of character and object consistency. We're not getting that continuity that we want. And I know there are some tools out there that are trying to improve character continuity, but it is still a major challenge to ensure that each of the shots that you are generating has the same character rendered in the same way with the same lighting and so on. But actually, we have a much bigger problem than just the continuity issue. The prompt is not being understood at best. If we try to give the generator a very simple thing, a tracking shot from left to right, that's where you have the camera moving from the left towards the right. Maybe you're tracking a character running or a car driving down the street. It's not being understood. The concept of left and right or put 3 of these things into the shot is simply not being understood. And this is even true when we try to do something with still images. So this idea that we have now the technology to replace movie creation with just let the AI do it is ridiculous. It's not possible at the moment. We are very, very far off from that ability. So one of the interesting questions then becomes, well, is AI actually being used in film production? And if it is being used in film production, how is it being used, and how successful is it in the ways that it is being used? And the truth is, AI is actually being used all over the place in film production to varying levels of success. So if we're going to take a look at a few different areas here, things from predicting the success of a film to ideation. A big topic is automatic and assisted rotoscoping, chroma keying, digital matte painting, deep fakes, de-aging, all these kinds of topics. So the first one is predicting success. And at the end of the day, this is what all the production companies are looking for, is they want to know, is a movie going to be successful? Now, they want to know, if I am given a script, is there a way that I can predict whether this script is going to succeed if I actually invest the money into it and turn it into a movie? So that's a big one. They also want to know, given that I've already made the movie and I have a trailer for the movie, do I think that this movie will be successful on its opening weekend? What's the expected box office ticket sales for that opening weekend? This weekend, there's 2 big movies opening. There's Wicked, and there's, of course, Gladiator 2. And before these movies had, the tickets weren't even available for sale yet so much. They were already making predictions on how much domestic funds would be brought in for ticket sales this weekend. This weekend hasn't even started yet. And they have been predicting this for about a month now. So we are trying to always predict how successful things are going to be. Now, there's 2 ways that you can measure success, of course, financial and audience ratings. And I want to say that the production studios care more about the financial success than the audience ratings. Because there's obviously many movies that do well with audiences, everybody enjoys it, but they may not necessarily be a financial success. The studios generally care about financial success. So some of the things that we're looking at are things like, well, can we even predict what week we should be releasing a movie on? And actually, this is an interesting thing. If you look at the average box office revenue by release week, we can actually see that there are some weeks where there are high revenues versus low revenues. So there's kind of the summer months right around the July 4th weekend, where we have pretty good box office revenue. And then in the month of December, we also tend to have pretty good revenue as well. And then there's a slump, so to speak, in September, October, and one from January through to about May. So, when we're trying to predict our sales, one of the things we need to take into consideration is, what are the other movies that are being released that week? And is this a week that people generally go to the movies? There's many, many different things that we consider. Now, there are some predictive AIs out there. Most notably, 20th Century Fox has an AI called Merlin, and it's based on the trailers that are available on YouTube, and they would classify it as an experimental attendance and recommendation system. So what it does is it takes a look at all of the trailers out there, and it's going to do some object identification and shot delineation for the trailer, and try to compute how long the objects are visible in the trailer, how long each of the shots are in the trailer. And using that information, it can do things like predict the genre And then it uses this information along with some other features it identifies from within the shots to try to predict what the top 5 films will be. Or just a ranking of the films that are being released during this period of time. What are they going to be based on the trailer and the information that they found in the trailer? And what they have found so far is that they're able to predict the top 5, usually successfully, but anything below the top 5, it's not doing a great job of predicting. So if you wanted to predict the bottom 5 films or the middle films, that's where it's really failing. But this is not the only success predicting tool. There are other production studios out there that are trying to, as I said, work with the scripts, because when you've got the trailer, you've already invested all your money in it. And at that point, it's too late. It's the situation where you've got a movie like John Carter, where Disney's invested $300+ million into its creation, and then it bombs. So there are other studios which are looking at, I don't want to invest any money. I just want to be given the script or the treatment. And I want to know, is this something that audiences might be interested in? Do I think, how is this going to compare to other movies that exist? Is there any reason for me to invest money into this film based on the script? How much money could I invest into this film? Is there anything that I can do to improve the possible outcome of this film if I invest into it, all based on the script? So we're using AI in these ways to try to predict success. We have a very long way to go here, but what's really nice is we actually have a lot of data available to help us here. So we have things like the IMDb databases, the OMDb databases, which go back to the early, I want to say they have films back to the 1920s, and they have box office sales going back pretty far as well. So we have lots of data to work with. Unfortunately, one of the things we don't have a lot to work with is the scripts. But one of the things my group is working with in lieu of the scripts is actually the subtitle files from each of these movies from Open Subtitles. And we're looking at how do the actual dialogue, how does that play a role in predicting success? So another way that this AI is being used is in this concept of ideation. Ideation is when the artists are sitting down trying to design the characters and the costumes, the sets, they're doing the world building. It's a highly imaginative job. You're given some rough idea of what, the world might be from the script, and you've got to spend some time trying to design the new characters and design the world. And it's challenging and it's very time consuming. You're going to go back and forth with the directors and the editors a lot, trying to find what is that exact look and feel for all of the different elements that go into this world you're creating. And usually this is done by digital artists, sometimes by hand in a sketchbook. But what's interesting is generative AI can actually provide a way for rapid prototyping and ideation. You can take a very simple idea and turn it into a bunch of images and adapt and make changes, discuss and repeat, and you could do it in just a few minutes. So these images across the bottom was my attempt at creating a 3-eyed alien with lavender skin, golden eyes, and feathered hair. And as you can see, these roughly give us some different ideas for what that alien could look like, but you'll also note that it didn't understand that I wanted 3 eyes. So the generative AI tools does give us some ability to do rapid prototyping, but one of the interesting things that artists will tell is that getting the prompt correct, or getting a prompt that will give you something that you expect, can actually be very challenging and time-consuming and frustrating. I've heard artists say that they can spend 1.5 to 2 hours trying to get a prompt that produces a result that they're happy with, and it would have taken them less time to sketch it. It would have taken them less time to actually draw it. Because again, and I've mentioned this before, a lot of important keywords are simply not understood. Things like numbers, positions, and so on. So again, this is another one. This was generated with Stable Diffusion. I wanted a studio portrait of a magenta furred cat with 3 cyan eyes sitting on a black satin with a black satin background. That's a fairly well thought out prompt. We got the magenta cat, we got the studio quality portrait, but it definitely didn't understand the concept of 3, and it didn't quite get the black satin part correct. So you can see, and I spent probably 5-10 minutes trying to generate this one. You can imagine if you have something that's a more complicated idea, like you're trying to generate this alien monster, it could take significantly longer to try to create a prompt that gives you some ideas for what that alien could look like. So one of the big areas, and I was saying big, I mean the biggest areas where AI is being used and could be used even better, is this idea of automated and assisted rotoscoping. If you're not familiar with the term rotoscoping, it's this task that we have to do for a large number of reasons, where we have to trace around each of the different objects or regions within a scene. And we do this for many, many different reasons. We might need to remove something from the scene. So for example, there's this weird, in this shot on the left, there's this weird metal bar. We might want to remove that. We don't like it. It looks weird. So I want to remove it from the scene. And the best way to remove it from the scene, I'm going to have to draw around it. I might use some keyframing to make it so I don't have to draw around it for every single frame. And then I'll be able to remove it, and then we'll deal with the hole it created later. So object removal is a really popular one. And it's not just things like removing objects from the scene that were supposed to be there. A lot of the times it's things like the boom microphone is hanging down into the shot, or somebody forgot their coffee cup in the shot, or one of the crew members is visible in the shot, and we need to actually manually remove them from the scene. It's also things like removing backgrounds or correcting backgrounds. We do stereo 3D conversion. We do a lot of rotoscoping for that. We also do rotoscoping for animation. And I mean, that's actually the original use that rotoscoping had. But regardless of what you are doing this tracing task for, it's extremely labor intensive. It's probably one of my least favorite visual effects tasks, because you have to go through frame by frame and literally trace around things. Now, I've done a really sloppy job of tracing things on the left, but on the right, you can see we tried to trace the horse's head a little bit better. When we're doing the rotoscoping task, it's not enough usually to just give up this rough outline. We usually have to trace each individual hair or each strand of hair. As it's or wisp as it's being presented. It's a very, very challenging job. And on top of that, we have all kinds of very, very challenging issues to work with, such as a lot of footage we receive has out of focus regions. And I mean, the challenge of rotoscoping, or automated or assisted rotoscoping, is really a challenge of segmentation and edge detection. But if you look at how films are actually being recorded, we have a lot of motion blur. Even in very large budget films, we have regions which are not perfectly in focus. Hair and fur, we have reflective objects, heavily patterned objects. So this is actually, for a computer, an exceptionally challenging job. But even for a human, it's really hard to do. So this is a shot from Jupiter Ascending. And it's of a woman making a bed, and she's throwing the sheet up in the air to, straighten it out and have it lay down nicely onto the bed. And because of the speed that the sheet is moving versus the speed that the camera is capturing, we actually end up with a lot of motion blur. And so the question becomes, if you need to trace this sheet, and indeed we needed to trace this sheet because this is a movie we converted from 2D to 3D, and we did indeed have to trace this. What do you trace here? How do you trace an object that is blurred? So there's lots of, even for a human, this is a challenging job. So there are actual assisted rotoscoping tools out there already. And Adobe has been working on an AI assisted rotoscoping tool for some years now. And I can show it to you on this shot and give you an idea of how it performs. So I'm going to jump out of it and over to my After Effects. So this is the latest version of After Effects, by the way. This is the After Effects 2025. And this has a tool called RotoBrush 3. So this is the latest version of their AI-assisted roto tool. And the idea is that the artist would sit down and they could assist by suggesting to the AI what thing in the scene they want it to try to draw around. And it doesn't do a bad job if you have something that has really nice, crisp edges. But I feel like there are many edge detection and segmentation algorithms that would do a pretty good job in those cases too. But if I try to use RotoBrush 3 here to identify this sheet, so I'm going to draw kind of the area I want. You can see that the magenta area it tried to outline versus the line I drew, they don't match. It didn't know how to handle that large blurred region. And it does have the ability to handle some feathering and some edges which are not so crisp, but this extremely blurry edge here, it just does not know how to handle whatsoever. And for the record, so I have actually converted this shot before. How did we handle it by hand? We actually drew 2 roto lines by hand. One is the inner roto line, which would be the line that represents everything inside this region is 100% opaque sheet. And then we draw a second outer line that would be, this is the border between everything outside of this is not having any sheet in it, and everything inside of this line has some alpha blended sheet in there. So we'd actually do 2 lines for something blurry like this, and then we'd create like an alpha mat to help us understand that certain percentage of this region is foreground and a certain percentage of this region is background, and then we'd use a blend tool later on. But for an AI assisted rotoscoping tool, it doesn't understand these heavily blurred regions. It doesn't know how to handle them. And this would be true again for any segmentation algorithm, any automatic edge detection algorithm we've tried, they've just failed to identify these regions. Now, this is another shot here where it did a bit better of a job. Again, this is RotoBrush 3 from After Effects. And in this case, I used it to separate the foreground character from the background. And it did a much better job here. But this in itself is not as fine-grained as we would generally like. If I was doing something like just background foreground removal, this would be a fine roto cut. But if I needed more details, I would probably have more roto lines, especially if we were doing stereo 3D conversion. We would actually need to identify her face, her eyes, her nose, her mouth. We would need to separate her hair from her head and her neck and so on, so that we could actually do the conversion. And you can do that in After Effects, and you can adjust the lines to some degree as well. But it's not perfect, and it still requires a lot of human involvement. And it certainly isn't something we can just turn loose and say, okay, it just works. This is an area of film production where we are still very, very far from having a truly useful AI-assisted tool. And there are other tools, by the way. So Runway ML, which I used to do the video generation earlier, they have an AI-assisted rotoscoping tool as well. It doesn't even come close to working as well as After Effects is, but it does exist. And this is an active area of research. So the Foundry, who creates a tool called Nuke, they are actually doing a multi-year collaboration with a production studio called DNEG and the University of Bath to create an AI-assisted rotoscoping tool called Smart Roto. And this, even after many years, is still a work in progress. And it's because there are just so many circumstances that trying to get a tool that will work under every circumstance or 95% of circumstances is almost an impossibility. They're training their tool. They have, my understanding is over 125 million artist-drawn keyframes and over 650,000 animated roto shapes. Because the thing about roto work is it's not about each individual frame. You have to actually track that object, that traced thing, through an animated sequence. So it's actually a very challenging job. And this is an area where it's very, very challenging, and we can still make significant improvements in it. So we are far, far, far from ready to remove the human in any of these rotoscoping tasks. And I'm not actually convinced we would ever be able to remove a human from it. Now, heavily related to rotoscoping is this idea of chroma keying. Now, chroma keying, this is where we generally are filming against a colored screen. And I've got my daughter here to help me with this particular one. So we film against a green screen, and then we want to replace the green with something else. And that seems like it should be an absolutely trivial task because you're just removing a color, right? Well, it's not as easy as you might imagine because we end up with a number of interesting situations. When we actually try to do the chroma replacement, we find that separating that colored background from the live foreground, there are edges that can be very challenging. So hair, fur, or any fuzzy region that could be blurry, it's very difficult to separate the green color away from the foreground objects. We also have issues of what if you have semi-transparent objects or reflective objects in the scene? How do you handle the chroma key replacements for those kind of objects? And I mean, how do we actually handle it? We don't include those objects in the scene because we don't want to deal with it. But one of the other issues that tends to arise is this idea of color spill. So even though the backdrop is behind the actors or the characters of the scene, there is still some diffuse reflectance of that green going onto the skin or the face or the body of the actors, and we need to be able to remove that. And that's where things get really challenging. And what we actually end up doing is we usually adjust the color in post. A lot of that, if you're doing it cheap and dirty, it means reducing the color so the green isn't as noticeable. If you're doing this for a movie, that might be manually color grading it with a secondary pass. But we also have this issue of cutting. How do we get a nice edge around things like the furry object? And how we usually end up solving that is with rotoscoping, which again has this problem of that's a very challenging line to draw. Now, of course, we have other solutions to the chroma keying problem, which are neither AI related or computer vision related. What we're actually doing right now to replace chroma backdrops is actually using wonderful LED video walls. So this is a video wall at Sheridan College's Screen Industries Research and Training Center at a Pinewood Studio in Toronto. And they have a lovely video wall, and you can just record your whole scene against a video. And when the camera zooms in, well, we're using Unreal Engine to drive the video wall so we can actually zoom in. So we get a real-time behavior on the video wall. And then you don't have to worry about the chroma key. Another issue we have is this idea of digital matte painting. So this is an artist whose job is to take all of the different layers of footage, and after they've been composited together, that means stacked all up like a big sandwich, they have to make sure that all of those different layers of footage and digital content actually blend together nicely. So they might be called in to do some painting, some manual painting onto the frames, filling in empty regions that were left by holes or unwanted elements, or just blending all of that content together really nicely. And this goes hand in hand with in painting, because they might need to remove some objects from the scene and fill those holes in. So I've taken this footage here, and this is, again, my daughter's sample green screen and an AI generated background with this funny looking airplane that's got landing gear on its tail, apparently. So what we would want to do as a digital matte artist is during the after the composite, we'd be like, okay, well, let's get rid of that airplane, and now I need to paint it with something. And you know, when I'm when I see this character in the front, she's got a toy sword, but it doesn't really fit the scene. So we're going to get rid of that. Now I need to paint something in there that does make sense. So we've removed those objects and now we've painted it. Now I actually did all of the digital matte painting for this particular shot using Photoshop's generative fill. And manual painting, of course, is always an option here. It's actually a good choice. And when it comes down to it, it's going to produce, in a lot of ways, the best quality results. But that means it's also extremely tedious, because you would be painting every single frame. And even if you were using keyframing and interpolation, you're still going to have to go through each frame and make sure every frame makes sense. We use, therefore, tools to speed up the process. We use things like content-aware fill, which is an algorithm that kind of searches the neighborhood of the region you want to fill for patches that have similar textures and tries to fill in that region. We've got healing tools and cloning, and now, of course, we have generative AI and painting tools as well. We can generate, of course, entire digital plates, so backdrops can be generated. We can fill just small holes or add and remove items to the scene to blend the letters together. And it does sometimes an okay job. But of course, one of the issues with using this generative AI, where we're describing some text or selecting a region, is it still has all of the same issues that we had with using generative AI tools for ideation. Trying to get the right prompt to produce a result we're satisfied with is very challenging. And then we have an even bigger problem, and that is the problem of temporal incoherence. It's the problem where if I fill the hole on frame 1 in a certain way, I need to make sure that the hole being filled on frame 2 is filled the same way. Because what can happen is if there's differences maybe in the color or the texture or even how that hole is being rendered between frames, it'll look like it's jittery or popping or bubbling in between the frames when it should be content that's smoothly animated. And it can cause serious discomfort in an audience for 2D footage, but it causes extreme discomfort if we're dealing with stereo 3D content, because how we fill the hole in the left and how we fill the hole in the right, if they don't match, we just created an object in the scene that makes no sense. And then it's moving and it's very uncomfortable. And what's interesting about this idea of temporal incoherence being problematic for these in-painting and digital map painting tasks is this isn't just a problem for tools like content-aware fill, although there is a temporally coherent version of that. It's not just a problem for manual painting, it's also a problem for generative AI tools. This idea that you need to fill the hole in the same way for each frame, that idea of coherence between frames, it's generative AI still suffers from this. So this is a problem for both AI and the other methods that we use for in painting. We have a long way to go here too. Now, one place where AI is being used relatively successfully is actually for deep fakes and de-aging. Disney, you'll notice these are all Disney-related posters, has been using face replacements and de-aging with deep fake technology for some time with reasonable success. And they're doing this to try to maintain continuity with older films. So the way we used to do it, of course, is makeup or finding actors who look fairly similar to the actors from previous versions. But now with deepfake technology, we can actually just, well, if the original actor has passed away or they have aged beyond the realm of makeup, we can just use a face replacement to take the footage we already have of that actor from many years ago and paste it almost onto our temporary face. So we've seen in Rogue One, Governor Tarkin, the actor who played him had passed away. In The Last Jedi, of course, Princess Leia, Carrie Fisher had passed away. In The Mandalorian, not to spoil anything, but Mark Hamill was replaced with a de-aged version of himself, and the same is true for Harrison Ford in the latest Indiana Jones. We used de-aging technology again there. And these methods to deep fake are getting better and better and better every day. They're continuously improving. But there are some things that we have to be careful with in order to make it successful. You need to make sure that whichever reference or placeholder actor you're mapping onto has some facial similarities to the person you're replacing them with. So you want to match things like age, ethnicity, and so on. You want to make sure that they're not wearing glasses, but the other character is, and so on. This is actually an example here from the 2020 short by the South Park creators called Sassy Justice, which is quite amusing if you haven't seen it, where they used a lot of deepfake technologies throughout the entire short, including replacing this child actor with the face of Jared Kushner. And you can see here, there is some facial similarity, but it's not great. It's not a great mapping. And that just comes down to it's mapping onto a very different kind of face. But this is one area where we are succeeding very well with using AI in film. And this isn't even half of it. So we could use AI for object detection, things like finding the boom mics, finding the things that don't belong in the scene. We can use it for object tracking, for match moving, which is trying to detect the motion of the camera and match it so that we can make sure that our digital content is being recorded with the same motion that the live content's being recorded. We're using it for photogrammetry, which is also 3D scene reconstruction, where we are given either a video sequence or a bunch of images and asked to recreate the 3D geometry. We're using it for color grading, and we're even using generative AI tools like ChatGPT for help with coding custom plugins. because a lot of the individuals who are working in the field are not programmers by trade. They still do some coding, and having something like ChatGPT assist them with their plugin development can be very helpful, although it still has a long way to go. This is an example here of using Runway ML's generative color grade to recolor a video. So I took the original dark and dreary one and I tried to improve it with some warm, sunny tones. And it did improve it a little bit, but it's still got a very long way to go. A human could color grade this much, much faster and more accurately. So just to kind of round this out, there are some realities of using AI in film production that is slowing this process down. One of them is copyright. A lot of these different models are being trained using content that we don't know if we have permission to use it or not from the author. And so there's a risk that anything that gets generated, especially for generative content, that you might end up with copyright images put into your film. And that means that you might end up with Pepsi cans in your film and you don't have permission from Pepsi to actually show that in your movie. And there's also US laws indicating that generated content can't be copyrighted. And if the goal of your movie is to make money and maintain all rights, using generated content might not be a direction you want to go into. So copyright does tend to be a big issue. As I mentioned before, trying to find prompts that produce quality results is extremely time consuming. And artists are truly often faster at these tasks than actually trying to squeeze the right text into a generative tool to get a good result. And then, of course, some of the other realities that have come up in the last year or two with the SAG-AFTRA strikes is issues of ethics. Is it ethical to do deep fakes? Do you have permission from the estate of the deceased person to use their likeness? Do you have permission from the living person to use their likeness? There's issues of extras selling their likeness in perpetuity to studios. There are many ethical issues associated with the deep fake and de-aging technologies. And then it comes down to just quality. None of the technologies I've shown you, proposed or current, can consistently produce production quality results in all scenarios. And that includes the rotoscoping, the in-painting. We still need a human to analyze the results and fix them. And if I'm going to have a human go over those results and repair them, why didn't I just have the human do it in the first place? And so at the end of the day, the quality is just not there. It's not actually saving us a lot of time right now. So there are lots of challenges to work on if you're in computer graphics or computer vision or machine learning. There are many, many different tasks that we could still improve significantly for the industry. Things like predictive modeling, things like assisted rotoscoping, even better object identification, better object tracking, better 3D model generation from photogrammetry images, better adherence to prompts. There's a lot of work that could be done here to assist the industry and help them produce better content with less manual labor. So is AI killing film production and visual effects? No, it's absolutely not killing it. Nothing that I have presented to you today is capable of removing a human from a seat. None of it is capable of that. All right. So thank you very much. If you have any questions, I'm happy to answer them.
Thank you. Let's thank Dr. Istead. All right. Do we have any questions from the audience? Yes, thank you for the very nice interesting talk. Questions? Yeah, I one about so that was very interesting video generation tool. What was it called? The one at the beginning?
So that one is called Runway ML, and they have recently partnered with Lionsgate Films to improve and use their technology.
And so how does it, so they have to like, you have a bunch of films that you put, parse into an AI with along with the scripts and so on, and then it kind of interprets all that, and that's how it was able to generate that scene automatically?
So there's a few different technologies out there to do the text to video. To me, that one looks a bit more like an evolution. So what you do is you'd start with just a text to image, and then it tries to interpret what the motion would be, and then it tries to, using the previous frame, generate the next frame from it.
Right, okay.
And I've tried to do that manually myself, and again, you don't generally get great results out of it.
Okay, yeah, I can tell it was a bit wonky with like characters appearing out of nowhere and so on.
They have another one, so that one is pure text to video. They have some other ones, I think it's called Act 1, where you can give it a reference video or a reference image and have it restyle it.
Oh, that's
And it
cool.
does a lot better with that, but that still means that you still needed to record something.
Right, yeah. Okay, any questions then? Questions from the audience? Oh, one in the back here. Bring you the mic.
So how would anomalies be prevented for training data? I understand lots of human-made stuff without mistakes is crucial, but how can it be prevented from, let's say, running away with faulty data that it generates itself?
Did you get the question?
So you want to know how to prevent it from running away with the various mistakes in the generated videos?
Yes, yes.
Yeah, so one of the tools that's been proposed for doing this is a control net, where you're providing like a guideline, and it doesn't have to be a like a high resolution or even a video-based guideline. It can be almost like a stick figure guideline, where you're giving the system something of an idea of where you want things and how you want them to move. And I've seen ControlNet do fairly decent for still images or sequences of stills. And I think we can adapt similar technology for the text to video. But I also think that we need to getting access to quality footage for text to video training is a big challenge, because a lot of studios, they keep their footage under lock and key. So the data sets that we actually have available for training are really small or not very high quality, which actually ends up being one of the biggest problems with training any AI algorithm for film or visual effects, is simply that studios don't have access to enough data to train anything meaningful.
All right, is there any final questions? Thanks. All right, let's thank Dr. Istead again.